This is TWiT.
Well, I opened Tech Meme. It's been a week and a half since I've been gone. Yes, I know. I didn't open TikTok because then I'd spend an hour watching and flipping. Instead, I opened Tech Meme because I was here to work. And what I found was a story that I know is very familiar to folks who watch and listen to this show, very familiar to you, Micah, because we've talked about this many times. We talked about the Epic versus Apple kind of battle. Turns out that was only the beginning. You know, it wasn't always just Epic versus Apple. It was also Epic versus Google. But Epic versus Apple has been the thing that's really caught a lot of attention. And now Google is facing another App Store reckoning, kind of in the shadow, or maybe creating its own shadow over the Epic case. 36 states, along with the District of Columbia, sued Google yesterday on antitrust grounds related to its control of the Google Play Store. And so very similar to what Apple had done for so many years, Google had a 30% commission fee of apps sold through the store. That's highlighted in the suit. Google allegedly, by the suit, overcharges developers via the Play Store. Of course, Google has adjusted its fees in recent months down to 15%, but that's tied to, the first million in annual sales by a particular developer. So that could jump up after that time, depending on the amount of sales and all that. Epic Games, like I said, sued Google for similar reasons just last year. And then, everybody has been kind of watching how Epic versus Apple has kind of laid its footprint on Apple's approach to its App Store. Apple's made some changes to the App Store, kind of in light of the things going on there. And in this case, you've got a lawsuit brought by state attorneys general, which I would imagine has a little bit more bite as a result. We'll certainly see how it all plays out. But I think what's interesting here is kind of contrasting the differences between what Apple offers on iPhones and iOS devices and what Google offers on Android. There's a lot of similarities, but there are some differences. Google actually points this out. They posted a blog post where they highlight the fact that Android is more open than the others. I don't know that they necessarily name Apple, but you know who they're talking about when they say the others when it comes to app distribution. In the case of Android devices, APK files have since almost the beginning have been the install files, and those can be offered by developers on their own sites. As one example, if I'm a developer for Android, I could always have my app on the Play Store and then also have my website, and let people come to the website and download the APK and install it immediately. There are no real barriers to do that Google puts up in front of that. Epic Games, of course, did this with Fortnite before they finally decided to bring Fortnite into the Play Store. They did that for like a year and a half, I think. It does require users to flip a switch on their Android device that lessens the security model in order to do that, because it's basically you're installing an app that hasn't been cleared by, you know what I mean?
Right. There's been no review of it other than
Exactly.
the review that is claimed by that developer.
Totally. But although at the same time, Google does have software including on the Play Store that scans the device and the apps that are installed, whether they're through the Play Store or not, to see if they match anything in their own database. So if there is something that matches, it would give you a warning message. So there are some protections, but in essence, Android users have a choice to install outside of the Play Store. The Play Store isn't the only place that they can go. Google also notes that many Android devices are shipping with multiple app stores. And I didn't really think about this, but it's true. If you've got a Samsung device, you get the Play Store. You also get the Galaxy Store. And they're both on the device. They both carry some similar apps. Obviously, the Play Store is way more robust than Samsung's Galaxy Store, but it is an alternative and it ships on the device. Samsung devices are arguably the most popular, most widespread, at least here in the US, Android maker of devices. So you're going to find that dual app store thing on many of the devices that you buy in the US. Apple users, to my knowledge, don't have a similar choice as far as that's concerned. But
right.
Anyways, what do you think about this so far? Where are your
See,
thoughts?
the frustrating thing about this that continues to be so frustrating about this is time and time again, we are shown that the folks doing these things, the folks that are claiming these things, that are arguing these points, don't have a full grasp of the situation, and in some cases have hardly any grasp of the situation and any understanding of the situation. Because yes, to just lump all of these companies together and say they're all doing the same thing and that it's all bad and that, it all needs to be fixed, then Google needs to come out with this thing, this, long post and whatever else they're doing. I'm sure increasing lobbying, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah.
It's like, it's so much talking to that monkey emoji that has its hands over its ears. Like the lawmakers that are concerned about this, I'm getting really frustrated because it's reminding me of too many situations where folks in some level of power make an assumption about you or about another person or about a situation, and they make that assumption without the full understanding, and then they just stick to that assumption, and then they close off their ears. And no matter what you tell them and how many times you try to explain it to them or try to show why it's not the assumption that they made, they've already made their assumption and they're sticking to it. And that's what this feels like. And it's like it's almost too late in many ways. And they just have gone, you know what, this is this and that's that. So let's keep going. And luckily, in the case of like, if we have to work in the bounds of what we have, then it's lucky, I guess, that lobbying to some extent does work. In an ideal world, we wouldn't have that, but let's work in the world that we have, which is far from ideal. It's lucky that lobbying works in a way that it can sort of peel back those hands a little bit. And the thing that frustrates me is, like, at the root of it, we've got human beings who are flawed, as we're all flawed, and that they only have so much time in a given day. And they have their own concerns and worries and issues and beliefs and all these things. And so if they don't want to sit down and listen to someone go on about, how this particular app store works, like, they're not developers, they're not, they're not paid by Google to spend all day, reviewing apps. It's like, we expect this group of people to have expertise in every living thing. Yeah, and they don't, and we know they don't. And so what we expect instead is that they listen to and trust the experts in these different fields of expertise. But the fact is, they don't always listen to and trust the people in these different fields of expertise. And then it results in things like this. Like, very clearly, Google and Apple should not be lumped into the same situation here, because very clearly Google is a more open platform. And it's like Apple has never tried to lump the two together, because Apple has always set itself apart from Google by saying that it is a more safe and secure platform by being more locked down, and has used the Google Play Store as an example of why Apple feels its system is more secure, yada yada yada. So the big companies that are involved in this, they're in agreement on the fact that the two are different, and the people in those places are. But then it's frustrating that the people who are responsible for making these decisions, it's like, for us, we can very clearly see when we look at something like this that they don't have any idea what they're talking about. And that's what gets so frustrating about it.
I think if, I'll be curious to hear what Jeff Jarvis on This Week in Google says next week, but I imagine this is one of those, the moral panic or something along those lines. Just in the sense of the anti-big tech sentiment, which is a huge deal right now, and it's driving a lot of this pursuit of antitrust, antitrust charges, which I'm not even saying that they're right or wrong to do so. Obviously,
right.
there's a there because it's happening in the EU, it's happening in the US. There are a lot of people who are increasingly more and more concerned with overreach and everything on the hands of big tech. But this particular example, to a certain degree, for me, feels kind of like, all right, this is like this is lumped in with that, and I don't know that they're necessarily the same thing. Maybe Google is culpable to a certain degree for something in here, somewhat, but saying that they're not competitive, or not allowing competition is just, I think, by many degrees false.
It's wholly inaccurate. Absolutely.
Yeah, it's absolutely false.
And there's a report that, so Facebook funded it because Facebook is pretty much mad at Apple for its desire to protect user privacy with its new tools to prevent app tracking. And so it's got an app tracking transparency tool that released as part of iOS 14 and continues to be improved in iOS 15, which will come out later this fall. And Facebook was very upset about this in the beginning. Then they published, pieces in the New York Times and, put out all these different things. And now it's like Facebook is doing everything it can to fight Apple on every front because of the app tracking transparency thing. And so Facebook helped fund a ComScore study about people who download apps in the Google Play Store and in Apple's App Store. And it looked at how often people use apps other than the default apps that come with the system in an attempt to argue that it reduced, the competition because the default apps were available. Apple, of course, said, and I say, of course, not because it's necessarily true or not true, but of course, because of course they're going to respond to say that there were lots of problems with the study. But what the study showed was I think it was 87% of people just stick with the default apps. Yep. And once again, I'm frustrated because I think about the average person who, when they are thinking about getting a smartphone or a tablet or something like that, they want to, they don't think of it in terms of the average person does not think about it in terms of, I want my airmail and my Android messages and my Carrot Weather and my Pocket Casts and they're not thinking about it in terms of app names. They're thinking about it in terms of activity and that's a good point. And tasks that they need to complete. And so you give them a tool that doesn't have any of that, and they've got to go out and look for it themselves. And suddenly they go and they find the first thing that's in the App Store that may be, free. And it may not be a good thing. It may not be something that would, that they should be plugging their email into. And there's some level of comfort that you can have with the default apps that are provided by the vendor to know that, those systems have a little more attention paid to them or are a little more secure, whatever it happens to be. And to make things more inconvenient for the end user for the sake of competition. And for people who are listening, I'm doing billions scare quotes here. That's where I get frustrated as well. As a person who, for a living, tries to help people with technology, that's where that there's more frustration there. It's so we should just not do default apps at all. So when you get a phone, do you
it's
not
a blank slate?
How do you listen to music? How do you? Somebody took it a little bit to the extreme. They're like, you get a phone, it's just got a black screen. You've got to figure out how to set up a TCP/IP connection. You've got to figure out how to install a browser on it. Like, I want people to be able to do the activities that they expect out of their devices, and it's like there are some folks who are bent out of shape about retributive action that's taken place, who are leading this charge, and then people who are going to actually be impacted not even knowing the full scope of the situation or how this will impact them and how it could negatively impact them and positively impact them. And yeah, I guess what it boils down to is I think that antitrust is very important, and that there are some things, I want the App Store to be a place where every developer can thrive, and Apple is not allowed to like promote its apps over other apps, or pop up like an Apple Music notification for, hey, you should get Apple Music, or those kinds of things where everybody gets equal access in that way. But I don't want it to get to the point where it's just this blanket, like, let's just make these devices not work until someone figures out how to go in and do all of the downloading and stuff. Because if that's the case, then what I'm going to end up doing because people are going to do a Google search and they're going to look for, how do I get mail on my phone? I'm going to be on iOS Today talking about how you download the default apps from Apple, because those ones are the easiest ones to use. You'll probably be talking about using Gmail, because that, a lot of people use Gmail accounts. And so it's easiest to just use a Gmail app or what have you. So yeah, that's like, I'm not complaining solely because it's giving me more work, but I'm complaining because of how it has the potential to inconvenience and at the end of the day harm the end consumer instead of helping, which is what the whole point of all of this stuff is supposed to be, is to help the consumer and make it better for the consumer. And it's like, are we trying to make things better for the consumer, or are we trying to win in this war against big tech as lawmakers? Is it like you just want to win one? I don't know. You know what I mean?
Right. Are you trying to improve the actual user experience at the end of the day, or are you just grinding an axe?
Right. Yes. And if you are, why think about the impact of what you're doing, which I know is hard for lawmakers. It
becomes a snowball. It becomes a snowball, and everybody starts packing onto that snowball. And and at a certain point, it just gets too big to control. It's like, oh, well, what about this? What about this? What about this? And yeah, you're right. It balloons to the size and to the scope that ends up being exactly the opposite of what it began as. Yeah, I don't know. No easy answers, obviously. And, a part of it is, like you said, a part of it is a misunderstanding of the technology on the other side. It's pretty multifaceted, but interesting nonetheless to see what happens here. I can't help but just kind of feel like this is just a settlement cash grab of some sort. It feels very much like that, but I'll be curious to see how it develops.